Remember in 2016 when Donald Trump promised to drain the swamp? Well, it may have taken him 8 years, but just a few weeks into his second term, and we're witnessing some nasty swamp creatures emerge as the sewage of corruption is drained from the nation's capital. That's today's Faith Check News.
Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.
Hey, thanks for joining us. I'm Brian Tuttlemore with Faith Check News, where we filter the news through the lens of God's truth. Our goal is to spark a lively conversation and to invite you into a community of people who want to think right to live free. So what we've done is we've created a website, faithcheck.news. And if you go there with me, you'll see one of the first stories that we can talk about is titled, "Was USAID Involved in President Trump's First Impeachment?" This is a fascinating story that I realize is a little bit of a flashback here, but let me just read it with you. U.S. agencies and government-funded organizations appear to have played a role in President Trump's first impeachment, allegedly using tactics reminiscent of overseas regime change operations. An act that, if true, would be both illegal and treasonous, says Michael Schellenberger. In an interview with Jesse Waters on Fox News, Schellenberger explains how an investigation into USAID has revealed they are essentially a PSYOPs operation for the CIA and Democrat operatives. They were doing these things abroad, essentially creating the predicate for Trump's first impeachment. And so if you go down here, I've got a link to Michael Schellenberger, and it's probably just best, let's just listen to him tell the story.
OCCRP does not operate like a normal investigative journalism organization in that its goals appear to include interfering in foreign political matters, including foreign elections, that are aimed at regime change. Sullivan told NDR,
"We've probably been responsible for about 5 or 6 countries changing over from one government to another government, because and getting and people, prime ministers indicted or thrown out."
As such, it appears that the CIA, USAID, and OCCRP were all involved in the impeachment of President Trump in ways similar to the regime change operations that all three organizations engage in abroad. The difference here is that it is highly illegal and even treasonous for CIA, USAID, and its contractors and intermediaries, often called cutouts, to interfere in U.S. politics in this way.
Well, there you have it. How about that a flashback to the first impeachment of President Trump? After all that time, remember, he could have been removed from office because the Democrats controlled the House and the Senate, but of course they needed a majority in the Senate to actually find him guilty and remove him from office. But they couldn't get it done. So as you see here on the headline picture, Trump was acquitted of those charges. And now today we're finding out that sure enough, those charges were manufactured and created by Democrat operatives to remove President Trump from office. That's just one example of some of the swampiness that's been drained from the nation's capital. The other story I want to cover here is that Trump spoke at the National Prayer Breakfast here this past week. And in the prayer breakfast, President Trump outlined his plans for a task force and a presidential commission aimed at protecting Christians from religious discrimination. Speaking at the National Prayer Breakfast in Washington, D.C., Trump detailed several initiatives to address what he described as ongoing threats to religious liberty, particularly against Christians. As I talk about here in the article, President Trump has put Christians at the center of his administration. Even just, I think it was just yesterday, Russell Vought was confirmed as the OMB director, the Office of Management and Budget. After being confirmed, he posted on his social media account that he praised God and he thanked people for praying him through the process. Trump told the attendees at the National Prayer Breakfast that America is and will always be one nation under God. At every stage of the American story, our country has drawn hope, courage, inspiration from our trust in the Almighty. And he went on to suggest that God has a plan and a glorious mission for America.
From the earliest days of our republic, faith in God has always been the ultimate source of the strength that beats in the hearts of our nation. We have to bring religion back. We have to bring it back much stronger. It's one of the biggest problems that we've had over the last fairly long period of time. We have to bring it back. Thomas Jefferson himself once attended Sunday services held in the old House chamber on the very ground where I stand today. So there could be nothing more beautiful than for us to gather in this majestic place. It is majestic, and reaffirm that America is and will always be one nation under God. At every stage of the American story, our country has drawn hope and courage and inspiration from our trust in the Almighty. Deep in the soul of every patriot is the knowledge that God has a special plan and a glorious mission for America. And that plan is going to happen. It's going to happen. I hope it happens sooner rather than later. It's going to happen.
I mean, wow. That's our president of the United States speaking right there. What do you think about that? Does that bother you or does that encourage you? Comment below and let me know what you think. And also, you know what? If you're getting some value out of this, please like and subscribe. That helps the channel get out there and more people to hear it. So how's Trump going to accomplish this? Apparently, he announced that he's going to create a presidential commission on religious liberty, which he said would be dedicated to safeguarding this fundamental right. Additionally, he pledged to sign an executive order appointing Attorney General Pam Bondi to lead a task force focusing on eliminating anti-Christian bias within the federal government. And he also revealed plans for a White House faith office to be led by Reverend Paula White, a longtime spiritual advisor to Trump. It's an amazing time, but the irony is it's created a rift in the Christian church unlike anything we've seen in the past. The biblical conflict almost seems comical when you read the Bible, because Joseph advised the Pharaoh of Egypt. Daniel was a primary voice in multiple Babylonian and Persian empires. Nehemiah rebuilt Jerusalem by leveraging his high-ranking positions with King Artaxerxes. Excuse me if I'm not pronouncing that right. Esther and Mordecai prevented the genocide of Jews in a cunning plot to win the favor of King Xerxes. Ezra, Obadiah, Jeremiah, and Isaiah were all advisors to kings of foreign nations in Israel. Each one of them was used by God to achieve his will. So what do you think? Should Christians shy away from opportunities to shape national and even international policy? Does the Ancient of Days want us to engage in the public square or just to retreat back to our mega church fortresses? All right, let's see. Let's go to the third story here. Oh, yeah. Wow. So earlier this week, President Trump met with Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, and came out and did a press conference after they met. And I'll tell you what, it sure seems like he was winging it to a certain extent. So let me do this. Let me actually read the story so you kind of know what's going on here. So Trump blows up conventional groupthink, suggests the United States take over and rebuild Gaza. On Tuesday, President Trump proposed that the United States consider taking over Gaza and rebuilding it into a new Riviera of the Middle East. The response suggests a lack of out-of-box thinking regarding the catastrophic failure of the Gaza Strip. So during the news conference, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's expression suggested he was still processing the bold proposal. And many Christians are equally intrigued and shocked by the idea that the United States, would take responsibility for a tiny strip of land that was established by the 1949 Armistice Agreement following the 1948 Israeli War of Independence. Before the Hamas-Israel war, approximately 2.3 million Palestinians lived in what was once the most densely populated area on the earth. Today, Gaza has been described as a demolition site. President Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, has estimated it could take as long as 10 years to rebuild Gaza. And I mean, you've seen the footage. There's nothing left. I mean, it's just rubble, and the buildings that are standing are leaning and ready to fall over. So how humane would it be to just throw 2.3 million people back into that disastrous space? Not to mention there's all kinds of bombs and ordnance that are unexploded and will likely go off. It could obviously kill even more people. So what I did is I created a meme on this because to borrow from Greg Gutfeld, he talks about this all the time, the prison of two ideas. The idea of a two-state solution was established in 1947 by the United Nations. So a group of really smart people apparently got together and said, hey, I know, we'll just have a two-state solution. So two different people groups will have total control of the same plot of land. And let's face it, this idea of a two-state solution hasn't worked. So what does Trump do? He thinks outside of the box. But me personally, I don't know that he's necessarily saying the United States is going to take control and we're going to send our troops and everybody else over there. In fact, he's clarified to say that no U.S. troops would be involved in that. What I think Trump is doing is I think he's shaking up the old guard, just like this meme is suggesting. He's forcing people to think differently about this problem, a problem that the two-state solution has not solved. And in that way, who knows? Maybe Trump can convince the Arab nations and Israel and the Palestinian people to approach us from a new way that's, well, benefits everyone. Who knows? Will the Gaza Strip turn into the Riviera of the Middle East? Even I'm not as optimistic as President Trump. Oh, yes. The last story I want to talk about here. You remember this bishop? She's the bishop who chastised President Trump. It was the second day after his inauguration, and they have this national prayer gathering, whatever they call it. It kind of seems sort of formal more than really spiritual. But that said, so the bishop who chastised Trump has received $53 million to resettle illegal migrants.
Yesterday, you have felt the providential hand of a loving God. In the name of our God, I ask you to have mercy upon the people in our country who are scared now.
So if you go through and read this story, Bishop Marion Budd got her 15 minutes of fame when she chastised Trump in a speech at the National Prayer Service, lecturing him on mercy towards illegal immigrants. Well, now we find out that she's been banking taxpayer funds to facilitate migrant resettlement. Her Episcopal Migration Ministries raked in $53 million in 2023 for migrant resettlement. Effectively, she's been facilitating the world's largest and most profitable human trafficking and child sex trafficking industry. Meanwhile, she slams Trump's immigration policies as cruel. The alleged Christian pastor is also a well-known left-wing political activist who chastised Trump for his 2020 church visit as a photo op. And here she is in 2025, setting up a photo op of her own at the National Prayer Service to lecture him on mercy. Yeah, Trump called her a leftist. He's right. So the bishop decries Trump's border policies while profiting from open border policies. And don't get me wrong, our faith should be informing our politics. And in this case, for Bishop Budd, we now know that her faith is in the almighty dollar. Like Ananias and Sapphira in the book of Acts, they were a married couple who sold some property and claimed to have given all of the proceeds to the church. Well, Peter was led by the Holy Spirit to call them out because it turns out they didn't give all of the money to the church. In the process, Peter said, "You didn't just lie to me. You didn't just lie to the church. You've lied to God." And yeah, they both died. So the alleged Christian bishop claims the moral high ground while pocketing government money. Now, I'm not wishing any harm on the bishop, but all I'm going to say is if you're standing close and you hear thunder in the sky, you might want to keep your distance. Preaching virtue, cashing in, total hypocrisy. I'm Brian Tuttamore. That's today's Faith Check News. Hey, remember to like and subscribe if you've gotten some value from this. Remember, think right to live free.